Okay, Shalom Aleichem. Today is Tuesday, and it's the 8th day in the month of Nisan, and the Nasi is Levnei Menashe, Gamliel ben Pedotzer. And ich vergessen wegen dem Nasi, and ich vergessen sagen dem Nasi. Now, I have a custom which goes back a long time. More than 20 years I've been doing it, and close to 20 years I've been posting it, maybe even longer. But before Yalef Nissen, I tried to learn and teach the Rebbe's Kapital. For many, many years, I did this at Beis Midrash LiNashim UBanos 770, where the classes went on till Yalef Nissen, barring an expulsion by the Gaboim. But since COVID, those classes were suspended. One of them is that Ariella Bas Mazel Tov is not in her full health. So the classes are l'schusa, but now I do it in my basement. The downside of doing it in my basement is the pressure of being ready on time. I have to come and give a class, ready or not, here I come, is missing. And the result of this is that the classes get delayed and delayed and delayed. What happened to me here is I've spent several days learning the Kapital. The whole Kapital is 4 psukim. And I'm sure there were hundreds of Sfarim on Tilim. I have a dozen or so. I don't have that many Sfarim. I have, of course, the Chazals. There's no Yalkut Shemani and Perek Kuf Chaf Gimel at all, although there's a reference made to someplace else in the Yalkut. And even the Medrash Tilim, Medrash Sheikh Atei, which has 4 little shtik alach, it's also excerpts from other places that have been copied and pasted to the Medrash Tilim Kuf Chaf Gimel. So you take out the Chazals, so you're on thinner ice. And then the Zohar, last year there was an enormous amount of Zohar and Kuf Chaf Beis. Kuf Chaf Gimel has some Zohar, and some of the Zohar is actually provocative, it makes you think, but not nearly as much as we had last year. And then the Tzemach Tzedek has some, but not nearly as much as last year. And the Rebbe has some, not nearly as much as last year. And then, of course, you have the standard Rishonim, Rashi, the Even Ezra, the Radak, the Meiri, which are from that we learn. I also have a Sefer, which I've picked up from a Acharin, Rabbi Yossi Paltiel. I don't know who he is. Smoises that I've cooked, but he's a long time ago, and we look at him. I have a Pirush of a Gira on Tilim, but there's nothing on this Kapital, so I look at it, but there's nothing for me to include. So I did a lot of preparation and a lot of thinking, and I need to teach. And I need to post, as you know, less than a month ago, on Yud Zayin, on Toiva Dasheni, we launched our 3rd website, and in God and Yichin, we're also going to be launching the app, which goes along with our website. We still are dealing with minor glitches, including the glitch of loading new classes up, which is why there haven't been that many new classes. And Amir Hashem, take of Yad, this will be resolved. And I have so many classes. I have a huge backlog of classes that need to be posted and radiate out into the world. And hopefully we'll, in short time, catch up on all the different things that are going on at InsideChasidus.org, including the glossary and the questions and answers, and the Maimorim with the boys, the Maimorim in the morning, the Maimorim at night, the Maimorim with the girls, the Tanya, the Hayem Yem. There's a lot of Schoira, a lot of material that needs to be posted. But right now we're doing the Rebbe's Kapital. Now, like every Kapital Tilim, in the Lubavitcher Tilim, which is called Tilim Ol Yosef Yitzchak Lubavitch, which was not published by Chabad originally. The Rebbe, our Rebbe, after the Rebbe, the Friedrich Rebbe passed away, picked the Tilim and said, we're going to publish this Tilim. We're going to offset. In other words, the Tilim existed from before. I don't know which printing house published this Tilim, but the Rebbe printed it in Tafshin Yud. That means 74 years ago. It's very hard to know who was the original. Was it Hebrew publishing? Was it some other American publishing house or European publishing house? I don't know which. But the Rebbe gave out this Tilim, and he renamed it Tilim Ol Yosef Yitzchak, and he added in the back the Kovitz Mechtavim, and at the beginning the Minhag Baramidas Tilim every day, and every Shabbos Mevarchim, and saying the Tilim for Yom Haledes, and so forth. So if you look at this Kapital Tilim, in the Lubavitch, what's called the Lubavitcher Tilim, Tilim Ol Yosef Yitzchak, it says, HaMeshoirer Mekoinein Alzman Aruch V'Rav she'avru b'kfar b'Galus. The composer, the compiler of this song is bemoaning the length and the extent of what we've been through in Galus already. Now that's odd for two reasons. First, as David HaMelech wrote this, that David HaMelech was the compiler of Sefer Tehillim. The Gemara says that there were 10 contributors to the Tehillim, but most of the Tehillim is David HaMelech's, and the presumption is that if it doesn't say somebody else's name, like Asaf or Haman or Bnei Kedach or Moshe or whatever the case is, we assume that it's from David HaMelech. And the Shir HaMalos, as far as I know, are David HaMelech's Shir HaMalos. Although the Chazal say that the Ove said Shir HaMalos, so it's been around a long time, but we assume that the Nusach of Shir HaMalos that we have is the Shir HaMalos of David. David HaMelech wrote the Shir HaMalos. David HaMelech, last time I checked, lived in the times the Jewish people lived in Eretz Yisrael. I can't say the times of the Beis HaMikdash, because the Beis HaMikdash had not even been built yet. In other words, it's not just before Churban Beis HaMikdash, it's before Binyan Beis HaMikdash. And David HaMelech is a moment in the history of the Jewish people where the Jewish people were in a very high situation materially, and correspondingly a high situation spiritually, although there was a lot of conflict, a lot of challenge. And evidently David HaMelech wrote many of his shirim, many of his pizmonim, many of his mizmoirim in a futuristic way. You have in Tanya Perek Mavav at the end, where he brings Midrash Yosef. Now again, you must assume that if David HaMelech compiled the Sefer Tehillim, that whatever songs Asaf wrote were included by David HaMelech, and Asaf is writing about Bnei Yisrael, about Goyla. That's how the Alter Rebbe writes it in Tanya. The Gemara says in Bava Basra that David HaMelech compiled the Sefer Tehillim, which means he completed it. So Asaf lived before David, or at the time of David, and yet it says in Tanya that Asaf is writing about Bnei Yisrael Sheba Goyla. And this kapital is similar. If you follow the Kaiseres, the title of this Perek, which is written in the beginning of the Tillim, in the Tillim, all the Yosef Yitzchak. I remember the Rebbe once making references to these Kaiseres, and he said, we don't know who wrote them. He doesn't know who's the author of these little headings to the Kapitlach. I have seen occasions where in some of the Rishonim, sometimes in an Even Ezra, sometimes in a Rashi, the words that made their way into these Kaiseres are found verbatim, meaning whoever compiled this probably did not write them, he simply took them from the Rishonim and their commentaries in Sefer Tehillim, maybe from the Chazal. But the Rebbe's expression was, whoever put these together was a Bar Samche. Bar Samche means the person you can trust, you can rely on. Now when the Rebbe uses the word Bar Samche, it doesn't mean it like you do, you can trust his Herrscher. The Chasam Sofer, the Rebbe calls the Bar Samcha. Bar Samcha means a Jew who's an authority on Torah, period. Who's one of those people whose connection to the Torah and connection to Hashem is so thorough, so comprehensive, at such a high level, that for lack of words, their words are the words of the living God. So this Kapital Tillim is defined by the compiler of these Kaiseres, these little Kepalach in the beginning of the Kapitlach Tillim and our Tillim, as a Galach Kapital, and it's bemoaning the length of the Galus. So the first thing is David HaMelech is speaking about events that are far in the future, which is ironic and odd. And the second, and this is more difficult to understand, that the Shir HaMalos are supposed to be uplifting songs. There are 15 of them, and of course, according to the Kabbalah, 15 goes on Yudke, Chochma Obina, Hanestaras Hashem Elokeinu. It represents godliness which is above the world. The Rebbe in his notes on the Shir HaMalos, which of course published in the Tillim, I think it's called Tehillas Menachem, that was given out by Vadlafat Siches years ago. So on Kapital Kufchaf, which is the first of the Shir HaMalos, have a whole lengthy discussion of the Rebbe on the significance of the Shir HaMalos. There's several whole Siches in the Kuta Siches that explain the Shir HaMalos, the 15 Shir HaMalos, and the Rebbe certainly focuses on the idea that the Shir HaMalos are songs of joy, which creates a bit of a problem. David HaMelech is singing into the future. The Rebbe sees them as Kapitel connected to Simcha. They're presumed to be a higher level, and yet this particular one seems to be speaking to pain. And it does. If you read the Kapitel certainly seems to be speaking to pain. So we have our work cut out for us. How are we going to understand this Perek? But as we always do, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to read it and translate it. And when I post it in Mitzvah Hashem, which I hope I'll do before Pesach, I will include the Kapital in the original Hebrew, although you don't. Everybody has a Tillim, number one, and it's also printed in the Shabbos davening. A couple of pages before Baruch Sha'amar, we read a few Shir Amalis, and this is one of the ones that we read. It's the second to the last one, I believe. And I'm reading it inside. Shir Amalis is the Song of Ascent. A song that connected the idea of going up to a higher level, or a song that represents something connected to a higher level. Eilecha nasasi es eine, to you I raise my eyes, says David HaMelech. Hayoshvi b'shamayim, that you sit in the heavens. And of course the first observation is, it would have been fine if it said Hayoshvi b'shamayim, who sits in the heavens. The Yud is extra, and all the Rishonim point this out, and there's a lot of discussion on this, including in the Zohar, what that extra Yud is. Hine, behold, or as is translated in English here, indeed. As the eyes of a male servant is to his master. As the eyes of a female servant is to her mistress. In a similar way, our eyes are directed to the Kadosh Baruch Hu, until he's going to give us chanina. What does chanina translate to mean? Grace, benevolence. We say two more times, please Hashem, give us grace. So you have three times the word chanina, right? The end of Pasuk Beis is Achi Chanenu, the beginning of Pasuk Gimel says Chanenu Hashem Chanenu. Three chaninas, three chains. Kirav Savanavuz, we've suffered much shame. Rabba Savalan of Shenu, our soul has been sated with shame. Halag Hashananim, the mockery that we get from Sha'ananim, and we're going to translate Sha'ananim as it's translated here, the carefree, people who themselves are not overworking, but they're busy making fun of us. Habu'uz legeyenim. And the buz again means the shame that we suffer at the hands of ge'eyenim. Ge'eyenim has many translations, but written it in English, it means balagayva, goyim that are arrogant nations. So there's three chaninas. We say three times Achi Chanenu, Chanenu Hashem Chanenu, and there's three references to shame. Rav Savaynu Vuz, Laga Sha'ananim, Habuz Lege'eyenim. So that's, so to speak, the structure of the Kapital. We're speaking to the Eibishter about Oirech Galus, it says in the Keseres, and we're saying our eyes are towards God. As a slave and a maidservant turns towards her master and mistress, we turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And some of the Rishonim give the painful interpretation of saying that a master and a slave have the kind of relationship that when the slave is beaten by the master, the only person the slave can turn to for mercy is that same master. When a shivcha, when a maidservant is beaten by her mistress, the only person she can turn to for salvation, for compassion, is the mistress who's beating her. And that's what we say, Kain Einenu El Hashem Lekenu, that in spite of the fact that the tzaras we experience in Galus are, in fact, Kvayachal from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu to give us chanina from the tzaras, which on a significant level, Kvayachal, David is responsible for. That's the translation of the Kapital Bepashtas. I intend on addressing this Perek from three different perspectives. There's three different angles on how you could read this Kapital. But before I do, I would like to make some obvious observations that are made by the Mifarshim that sort of overview the Perek before we go into the particular insights into the Perek. And they are that, as often happens in Tanakh, the Kapital starts by Lashon Yochad and it changes to Lashon Rabim. The Kapital begins, Elecha nasasi es einai. To you I turn my eyes, I raise my eyes. Hayeshvi b'shamayim, so that's said in Lashon Yochad. And the next pasuk we say, Kain eineinu Hashem Elokeinu, Lashon Rabim chanenu, Hashem chanenu, Kirav savanu, Rabba savalan avshenu. We all of a sudden shift from Lashon Yochad to Lashon Rabim, which of course is problematic. If this pisma and this mizbah is being said by Lashon Yochad, why do we suddenly switch from Lashon Yochad to Lashon Rabim? From singular to plural. And of course one of the ideas is that the beginning of this Kapital is the leader of the generation, is the Nasi Yisrael. The Rebbe, the Nasi Ador, the Godel Be Yisrael begins, Shir Amal's Elecha Nasasi Es Einai, Hayeshi Bashamayim, I, so to speak, the Godel Be Yisrael, as the shliach tzibur of Klal Yisrael, or you may say the worthy mafgia, the worthy mispalel on behalf of Klal Yisrael, speaks in singular, Lecha D'Shem Nafshi Yesa. But what he is carrying the prayer of the community, of everybody else, which is what he then follows up with, Hinech Eine Avadam Al Yad Adonai Keinenu El Hashem Elokeinu. So one insight is that the Perek, this song, which is a description of Yidden and Galus, and again, you'll see later on that I'm going to give you 3 different insights into how to understand that, although all 3 are connected to the idea of the Jewish people languishing in Galus. So the Gadol B'Yisrael, the Rosh B'nai Yisrael, speaks out, and he says, Alecha Nasasas Einai. And I guess one of the ways of translating those words, Nasasas Einai, I'm lifting my eyes and lifting with me the words of my flock. And what are the words of my flock? Hine Ke'ena Avadam Yad Adonai, Ke'ene Shivcha Yad Yiveta, Ke'enenu L'Shem Elokeinu Mashiach Hanenu. So that's one very big observation, that the Gadol B'Yisrael speaks initially, and he carries with him the prayers of the community. That explains why it goes from Lashon Yachid to Lashon Rabbi. Alternatively, that every single one of us speaks to Hashem as individuals. And at first we speak on behalf of ourselves, and then we speak on behalf of all the Jewish people. We begin to say, as individual Yidden, Elecha D'Shem Nafshi, Elecha Nasasi as Einei HaYeshu B'Shemaim, as a private citizen, as a Pashtarid, you reach out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and you talk about the Tzaras HaGalus, and then you don't only speak for yourself, but you speak for the community. And the third pshat, now this I made up, we all know that one of the themes, which is connected to Pesach, is the theme of Mashcheni Acharecha Narutza V'Yanei Melech Hadorav. That Pesach and Sfiras HaOmer and Matan Torah are connected to this pasuk, Mashcheni, which is Lashon Yachid, draw me, Acharecha Narutza, we will chase after you, Lashon Rabim, and then it includes the third time of V'Yanei Melech Hadorav Negil V'Nismech Haboy. So Mashcheni goes on Pesach, he says Mitzrayim, Acharecha Narutza goes on Sfiras HaOmer, and Haviyar Melech Hadorav goes on Shavuos. So the explanation in Chassidus is that when Yidden are leaving Mitzrayim, it's only the neshama that's being taken out of Mitzrayim. The guf of the nefesh bahamis are behind, and that's the Mashcheni. Hashem should draw the neshama out of Mitzrayim, and then Acharecha Narutza means once the neshama is taken out of Mitzrayim, the neshama and the nefesh sichlis and the nefesh bahamis and the guf are all now running towards Hashem, the beater of Sfiras HaOmer, and then on Shavuos they become singular in their connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's the Haviyar Melech Hadorav Lashon Yachid again. And that's an insight that happens to be timely, because the Rebbe's Kapital, the Rebbe's Perek, the Rebbe's Yom Haledes is Erev Pesach, Yud Aleph Nisan. And so it begins with Elecha Nasasi Es Einai, where the Neshama is reaching out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu because of Tzaras HaGalus. And if you're approaching the Perek from that angle, obviously you're talking about Tzaras HaGalus, that a Pnimi is the Tzaras, the Neshama's Tzaras are Tzaras about the ability to have a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So at first the Neshama cries out alone, Elecha Nasasi Es Einai, I raise up my eyes to Elokus Kvayachol that's Yeshvi B'Shamayim. And then you follow it up by speaking about what's really in Galus. What's really in Galus is not the Neshama wherever it is Elokus, but it's the guf on the nefesh bahamis and chelki be'elam keni avadam yad adeneim keni shivcha yad yiveta keni l'shem elokeinu hashachanenu lashon rabim, that not just the neshama but also the guf of the nefesh bahamis are crying out b'cheish hagalus. I remember once, I was there at the time, but I've heard the tape so many times I cannot say I remember it from then, but it was 40 years ago this year, Tafshin Dalad Mem, by the Sichos of Chalamed Sukkos of Simchas Beis Hashiyeva. My recollection was that it was a Shana Rabbah, but I could be wrong. It was one of the nights of Sukkos where the Rebbe was speaking, and was speaking about the idea that Galus doesn't make any sense. And the point that Rebbe made was that Galus doesn't make any sense because this is the only way a Yid's going to scream out Masei b'chol keiche b'chol muhusei, b'chol nafshei b'chol ruchei b'chol nishmasei b'chol ma'odei. Right? So the Rebbe said if Galus made any sense, it would a little bit diminish our ability to cry Ad Masei. And then the Rebbe said, and he got very emotional when he said it, the nefesh halakis, the neshama, wherever is telekus. The nefesh habahamis, the animal soul. And the Rebbe said, El vilnish zayin came behema. And when the Rebbe said those words, he completely broke down. El vilnish zayin came behema. So Alech and Asa says, Einya yeshe bashmaim, this is the neshama. And Kene Nenu, Allah the Shem Lekenu Achechanenu, Chanenu the Shem Chanenu Kirasav Anavuz, Rabba Soval Anavshena Laga Sha'anana Buz Yenim. This is the goof, this is the animal of the Yid crying out, Vifo the Shir. How long is the Galus going to affect the life of the Yid? Is going to be embarrassing to the Yid, even if it's to the goof of the Nefesh Bahamas. It's enough, it's time for the Geula Amitis Vashlema Teika from Miyad. That's another way of understanding this transitioning from Lashon Yachid to Lashon Rabim. Lashon Yachid goes on the Neshama, and the Lashon Rabim goes on the Guf on the Nefesh Bahamas. Now, in the first pasuk, Shir HaMalis, that's the thing that's frustrating to me in the word Shir HaMalis is a song of ascent, a song of Aliyah, a song that's connected to Yud Kei Chochmah and Bina, which is so joyous and so spiritual, and yet somehow it's so deeply connected to Galus. And I don't know if I have an answer to that question, but I certainly don't have an answer to that question now. Then comes the words, so it says in Medrash, it says in the few little lines you have for the Medrash Tilim, means that every single Eivid in the person praises HaKadosh Baruch Hu, just like you have in the Medrash Perek Shira, that every animal sings a song to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So when the human being, not just the totality of the person, but each part of the person has its own song. And in this case, it's the eyes of the person are singing Shira HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And some of the Midrashim point out that this is the parallel. The Zohar certainly points out this is the parallel of what we had a couple of years ago. Esa Einai El HaHorim. And they talk about the difference between Esa Einai El HaHorim and Elecha Nasasi Es Einai. The Zohar says Elecha is lower than Es Ein El Harim. Harim is Zohar. Elecha is Malchus. But that the Shedish of Elecha is even higher than Harim. That's how the Zohar explains our Perek. But the Medrash says very simply that the eyes of a Yid praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Every part of the person praises HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now when you talk about Einayim and the Einayim's praise for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so Einayim, eyes, are connected to Choshatzir, to the power of communicating the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu through the visual arts, through seeing. And of course you have in Chassidus that Einecha Yoinim, the eyes are the window to the soul, and the connection that one person can form with another person through the eyes is very deep. According to Kabbalah, there's the Metzach of Ak, there's Eisen Chet, and Peh of At, there's Einayim. Einayim is a very deep mechanism of connection between two human beings. And Elechan Asasias Einai is the idea that a person is connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, praising HaKadosh Baruch Hu, using the medium of the eyes, which is a very, very deep bond. It's a very, very deep bond. And the Yid says, Elechan Asasias Einai, I'm raising up my eyes to you. Like I mentioned before, what is you in contrast to Es Einai El HaHorim? So the Zohar says that Horim goes on Atzilus, Zoh, and Elecha goes on the lower level, it goes on Malchus. But that the purpose of Elecha, of raising up our eyes to the lower levels in Atzilus, to Nukva, is that it should come down from there to us, as the subsequent psukim are describing. Ke'eni avodim yad adineihem. Making repeated references to the eyes, and we look with our eyes at the eyes of the Eibishter, so to speak. The Eibishter should bring down his eyes. That the eyes of the Eibishter should look towards the Jewish people. So Elechan Asasias Einai is a Yid reaching up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Eibishter should look down at us. So the Zohar explains that Elecha is a lower level than Es Ein El HaHorim. Es Ein El HaHorim is Zoh. Elecha Asasias Einai is only Malchus. But that the Shedish of Elecha Asasias Einai is higher, is in whatever, the source of all flow of godliness. In other words, Kesed, higher, Chochmah Bina, and even higher. So although directly Elecha Asasias Einai is lower than Es Ein El HaHorim, Mystically, the idea is that we're reaching much, much, much higher, that Elokus should go much, much, much lower, and the Eibusha should respond to our looking towards him with our eyes, with Kavayachal, him looking towards us with his eyes. Now, of course, why this is interesting is because if this Perek, as it says in the Keseres, and it's understood by many of the Mifarshim, is a Galus Perek, we know from Chassidus, on the Maimorim that are connected to Purim, Balayla Hu Nadad Shnasa Melech Malkei Shaleilam, or the Maimorim which you have in Chassidus, Ani Yeshein of Alibiyer. There's this Maimorim that describe Galus being sleep. As you know, there are two basic mishalim, two basic metaphors for sleep. One metaphor is the metaphor of a ibur, of a pregnancy, and the other metaphor is the metaphor of shina, when a person's asleep. And Chassidus says when a person's asleep, there's a lot of limitations in the ability, person's body to carry their soul. And the most obvious change is that the eyes are closed. You can't see it all. The other chushim still function, but there's a distortion. There's an entanglement. That's why you could dream, peel the kupa the macht, if you thought about it by day and so on. Dreams don't create new realities. They just mix different realities together to create confused realities. But your eyes are closed. And the Chassidus of this is that the ability to see godliness is completely shut down. That in Zman Galus, there's a numbness. That's what Chassidus says. You can be very, very inspired 1 minute, and the next minute you can fall into Taivis. Because in Galus there's a huge lack of das, because the senses are compromised because we're in a sleep-like state. But typically the most significant place where that sleep-like state is manifest is in the eyes. And here is a Kapital Tilim, which is all about Galus. And Elech says it's 4 times. Elech says Einai ke'einei avadim ke'einei shivcha ke'einei neinu. So that in Galus, in spite of the fact that we're asleep, we're looking towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the only answer to this question is like it says Tak in the Mamarim of Purim, that Balayla Hu Nadad Shasa Melech, Hashem is sleeping. And sleep means that his relationship with the world is that you don't see the overt presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You don't see the so-called favoritism that the Eibishter has towards the Jewish people, Kavayachol. But that in the middle of the Galus, where the Eibishter's actions do not reflect the favoritism, the special love that Hashem has for the Jewish people, but it's really still there, it's just confused. And at very, very special moments, and frankly, Tafshin Pei Daled, as you and I are sitting here today, it's a very special moment, it's a very critical moment, it's a very serious moment, but all of us feel that from this final fiasco, from this recent fiasco, will come the Gili of Melech HaMashiach and the Gula Amitas Vashlema. The Kapital Tilim that we're reading this year of the Rebbe's is so apropos, both the basic idea of Galus and this particular point of Elecha Adeshem, Elecha Nasasias Einai Hayeshvi Bashamoyim, that it says in the Zohar that when a person sleeps, their eyes are closed. But the Eibishter has Eina Pnicha Deleinim, the one eye that never closes. And that's the eye of Atika Kadisha, like a fish that doesn't have eyelids. The Madreg of Atmas of Elokus is always looking at the Jewish people. Normally, the eyes of Elokus come down into Ishtalshalos. So the blessings of the Eibishter to the Jewish people happen, but that's what Geula means. And you see that there's a different relationship. If we're tzaddikim, the Eibishter rewards us immediately. And if we step out of line, the Eibishter corrects us immediately. But the overall connection with the Yidden and Hashem is different than the Havdul, Yidden and other nations. But in Galus, all this is very confused. But there's still the Eina Pkicha Deleinim, Hine Leyanav Eliyishin Shemi Yisrael, even when the Eibishter acts in his relationship with the Jewish people, like as if he's asleep, the one eye is always open. He's not slumbering and he's not sleeping. And the Yid reaches towards that eye with his eye. And that's this emphasis, Elecha Nasasiyas Einai, I'm reaching out to you, Ayeshi Bashamoyim. Even though Ayeshi Bashamoyim can be explained on lower levels, as I'm going to discuss momentarily, but this is one of the ways of understanding. It's Einai, the eye of the Yid, that's not reaching Kvayachal, towards the eye of the Eibishter, that is present in the world, within the parameters of Seder Ishtalshalos, because in the Zman HaGolus, that's missing. The Eibishter's got his eyes closed, he's Kvayachal. But Yikas Kiyoshan Adeshem, the Eibishter makes himself like as if he's asleep. But the eye of the Yid is reaching to the eye of the Eibishter, which is open, even in Zman Galus, which is the eye of Atika Kadisha. And we say it 4 times. Lechem Sasias Einai Hine Che'ene Avodim Yad Adinem Ke'ene Shivcha Yad Giveta Ke'ene Neinu El Deshem Elekenu Achi Echanenu. That the eye of a Yid is trying to reach out to the eye of Atzma Ein Seif that doesn't sleep even in Zman Galus, and to draw from there Genug Chanenu Deshem Chanenu Kirav Zavayna Vuz Genug Alaga Sha'anana Bavuzageinim. That's one of the ways of understanding the significance of Lechem Sasias Einai. So the Zohar says Elach is lower than Einai Lahorim, but the Shadish is far, far higher, because we want that eye should have hashpah, not just on the spiritual world, but should have hashpah on the physical world down here in this earth. You should see that every single Yid is a Ben Yachid. Shehela does Kenim, the Heidim Zekenim Le'izik Nasam, like it says from the Baal Shem Tov. And the love that the Eibishter has for every Jew is unconditional. And it should show itself in the Gili of Bracha and Atzlocha, and B'tachan, and Shmira, and safety. And of course, most of all, in giving us the koyach that we should be Yidden, the Yidden are supposed to be, which is not just what the Eibishter wanted, but it's the greatest bracha for every single Jew. And that's the meaning of these words, Allah Sasias Einai. And then of course comes the words HaYoshvi B'Shamayim. The Eibishter, as he sits in the heavens, so there's a lot of kashas. One of the kashas is, what is this Yud? And the other kasha is, says B'Shamayim, isn't the Eibishter everywhere? And this is discussed in many of the different commentators on this Perek, why we define the Eibishter as being B'Shamayim, and why that extra Yud is added. But in light of what I just said, that the Lechem Sasias Einai, and we're trying to touch Koyachal, the eye of the Eibishter, where even as Zman Galus is open, the Yud of HaYoshvi makes complete sense. The Yud of HaYoshvi means the Yud which is above Ishtal Shalos, that brings the Eibush down Koyachal into Shamayim, and the Eibush coming down into Shamayim, as the Shaykhs does as well. But the Ikid is not the Shamayim, the Ikid is the Yud of HaYoshvi, that the Yud of Atzma Sein Seif comes down. It says in Medrash, in the Medrash Tilim, like I told you before, the Medrash Tilim has 4 little pieces that are all excerpts from other places. The Medrash Tilim writes, the Mifarshim on the Medrash Tilim on this Perek write that there is no Yalkut, so they took it from other places. That Yidden say to the Eibishter that if not for us, you wouldn't be Yeshe B'Shamayim. Yidden tell HaKadosh Baruch Hu that they're the reason the Eibishter is Yeshe B'Shamayim. Like it says from the Baal Shem Tov and from other Sfarim, V'ata Kodesh Yeshev Tilas Yisrael, the Eibishter is completely removed from the world. And the Eibishter's ability to come down and have a connection to the world, which is like that famous story with the Baal Shem Tov, who met this Parush, who was disturbed by the Baal Shem Tov's asking him how he's doing, and he's wasting his time. And the Baal Shem Tov told him, as a name to the Meibishter Zayin Panos, he's depriving Kadosh Baruch Hu of his livelihood, because the Eibishter lives on Tehillas Yisrael. V'ata Kodesh Yeshiv Til Yisrael. Hashem sits on the praise that we give him. And you know the Rebbe has in the Maimorim that this story is associated with simple Jews who were giving the Eibishter praise in Yiddish. Gleich Hashem Yisborach, gebench leid the Helika B'Shefer, gebench als ein der was lebt ewig. And the Rebbe says that this story of the Baal Shem Tov, where the Baal Shem Tov would ask simple Jews how are they doing, so that they should bless HaKadosh Baruch Hu in Yiddish, is referencing the idea of Hamoiru Beis Galus. It's not blessing the Eibishter Kvayochel, where is Oizgestellt, and say the Rishtalshlos, but Atzmas and Hus Mamish, the Eibishter is by himself, because they're talking in Yiddish, and they're referring to the Eibishter like children do. And when they're referring to the Eibishter like children, this is the Eibishter himself, which is above any kind of Kabbalah and any kind of complexity of understanding within the parameters of Torah. The simple Jew touches the simplicity of Atmos and Hussein Sav Baruch Hu. And perhaps that's the meaning of this Hayeshvi B'Shamayim. If the interpretation of Einai, Lechem Sasias Einai, is as we mentioned, so then the Hayeshvi B'Shamayim is a similar thing. The Eibishter comes on into Shamayim from levels which are far, far, far higher than Shamayim. And of course the most important thing is that it should come down to us as we are down here in this world. And by then we do something very unusual. The Meshorer, which is David HaMelech B'Pashtus, is trying to describe Jewish peoples looking towards Hashem for support, because nobody else can help them. So we use a mashal of an Eved and a Shivcha. A male servant and a female servant turn to their master and to their mistress, And a yid kein einenu ela v'Hashem Elokeinu ad sheyachanenu. And there's a variety of different interpretations on this mashal and the nimshal. Why does David HaMelech have to describe our turning to HaKadosh Baruch Hu with our eyes to that of an Eved and a Shifcha? There's a variety of different interpretations on it. The first one is, they have in Samach Vav in Nomiknerav, that an Eved, in his lack of complexity and sophistication, relates to the Eibishter with a simplicity which gets him in touch with Atzmus Hussein Sof. If you're familiar with those Maimorim Umiknerav, and then Dvorim and so on, there's 3 Maimorim on this sugya. So Chassidus talks about the Ben, and the Eved Nemon, and a Sad, and the Eved Poshet. A Ben is a son, that's the Madrega of Atzilus. A Eved Nemon and a Sad, this is the Ruchni's Dika world. So Eved Poshet is a prostadid who has no meaningful relationship with the Kadosh Baruch. He's very, very simple. And his involvement with Hashem, with bittul, with a submission. And the Samach Vav explains that the Eved Poshet relationship with the Eibishter is higher than the Ben and certainly than the Eved Neman and the Sad. The simplicity of the simple Jew who submits to Hashem. He does a mitzvah just because Hashem said. He doesn't understand, doesn't feel. Or as they say in America, doesn't agree with. And he simply does it, makes him closer to the Eibishter than all of those. Because when you try to relate to the Eibishter with your own devices, you're not relating to the Eibishter, you're relating to the Eibishter as you understand him. But when you're not trying to understand the Eibishter, you're simply submitting to the Eibishter and accepting the truth of the Eibishter, then you're connecting to Atzmos Mamish. You're connecting to Eibishter that he is by himself. And that's what we're saying. Ke'eini avodim yad edeneim. Ke'eini shivcha yad gvir, the simple people, whose relationship with Hashem is extraordinarily simple. It's not sophisticated at all. We're not coming to the Eibishter with any kind of worthiness. We're not his sons. We're not his loyal servants. Not like Eliezer. We're not like Sar Lefnei HaMelech. We're like an Eved Poshet. Our eyes are trying to reach the eye of the Eibishter, which even in Zman HaGolus is not closed. Because like Avodah b'yad adineim, Shivcha b'yad gevirta, we're approaching him with a submission and a bittul, a Kabbalah sale, a simplicity, and in that simplicity, we're touching the pshitas of Atzmos Ein Seif, like the Frierdiker Rebbe said famously. I mentioned it before, that when President Shazar came to the Rebbe many, many years ago, he talked about the Russian Jews. And he said, they're very ignorant, but they're very sincere. And the Rebbe said, the Rebbe dem Loshen am Oretz sagen ish poshet. The Frierdiker Rebbe did not like the expression ignoramus. He would say a simple person. When he would add the pshitas from ish poshet, they like them pshitas atzmos, the simplicity of the simple Jew, touches the simplicity of the Eibishter himself, mamish. And that's the Keini Avodim Yad Adineim. We make a mashal that we're approaching the Eibishter Zman HaGolus like an Eved and a Oma, and a Shivcha. We're approaching it with a simplicity, and that simplicity actually gets us access to him himself. Like you have the famous Zohar on Tfil Onichiyatev, that the Oni goes on Moshiach, who's richer than rich. He's richer than Moshe Rabbeinu, but the approach to the Eibishter is an Oni. We need to say he's not nispal from the Yiloim, he wants Atzmas Mamish. And that's how we describe our reaching out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu at this point. We're approaching the Eibush with our eyes. But like an Eved and a Shivcha. There's nothing fancy and sophisticated and worthy about it. It's like a simple person approaching Atzmas V'Tzav Baruch Hu. Now, of course, there are other interpretations. For example, in the Zohar, that the Eved and Shivcha goes on Klipa, goes on Chitzonius. And we say, if in Klipa it is true that Eved and Shivcha turn to their Adon and to their Gvira, certainly in Kedusha, Einenu Ela Deshem Elokeinu Achi Echanenu, or to enhance the Zohar a little bit further, that you have to flip the pasuk around. That when Einenu Ela Deshem Elokeinu Achi Echanenu, so the Eved and the Shivcha, which goes on Klipa, goes on Umis Heilam, are also turning to their Adon and to their Gvira. And then there's a Gavaldik and a Ben Bechaya, which the Tzemach Tzedek brings in this Perek, an unbelievable Bechaya, which is in Pashas Chukas, where he makes reference to the Jewish people in the Midbar. That in the Midbar, the Jewish people did not have pas pesal, they didn't have bread in the basket. Every single day, the food came directly from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we, in Galus, are saying to the Eibishter, Ke'eni avad mi'adad yineya. Ke'eni shilcha yad gevirta. And in this case, we mean Yidden and the Deir Midbar, who are in the highest level. That their closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu was so great that their food came from Him every day, and they didn't save it from one day to the next. They were not allowed to, and they didn't, and if they did, it wouldn't work out. And each day, Lechem Chukam came directly from the Eibishter, Keinenenu. El Hashem Elokeinu Ad Shechanenu, we, in Galus, are reaching out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the same kind of benevolence, for the same kind of grace, that Hashem should have Rachmanis on us in the kind of way that every single day, literally, we see the Eibishter's hand in our lives. So that's a Machtzedi connected to the Rabbeinu Bechaya on this pasuk. That, of course, the Helik of Aditchev Rav says, also goes on Yidden. They will approach him like an Eved and a Shivcha until he's going to treat us like a father and a son. And then we'll say, we're Eved and a Shivcha when Kvayachal, the Eibush, is acting like as if he doesn't know us, we don't have that special relationship with him. And we're reaching out to him nevertheless, because an Eved and a Shivcha have nobody else to turn to except for their master, even if it's their master, which is the source of their anguish. And we say, until the Eibush gives us Chanin, and then we're not going to be an Eved and a Shivcha in our relationship with him, but we're going to be Bonim, who the Eibush is going to show Chanina to. And of course, you know that the word Chanina, is from the Lashon Matnas Chinam, like Vo'es Chanan ala D'Shem Matnas Chinam. The Eibush gives us a gift which is completely for free, undeserved. And we're asking Dafka for Matnas Chinam. Like it says in Chazal, that even though tzaddikim are worthy of all kinds of grace from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Matnas Chinam, they insist on asking something which they're getting out of the grace of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we're doing the same thing. And when I was preparing the classes, I was thinking that we're learning Rambam. And today's Rambam is the Hilchos Kishma, Perek Gimel Adal, the first Perek of Hilchos Tefillah, which means literally in the last week, we learned in the last 7 days. If you go 3 Perakim a day, yes, Hilchos Teshuva is 3 days and 1 Perek. Yesterday was the beginning of Hilchos Kishma, that's 4 days backwards, and then you have Hilchos Avodah Zarah. At the end of Hilchos Avodah Zarah, you have the Hilchos of Leisa Chonim. And the Rambam, if you add them up, has 4 different interpretations of the word Leisa Chonim. And the 4 translations of Leisa Chonim are very connected to the word Chanina. Number 1 is from the word Rachamim. Number word from the word Chaniyah, to give habitation, a place to live. Number 3 to say praise, and number 4 to give a gift for free. And when it comes to the halachas of Leisa Chonim, how that applies to Meseilu. But in our relationship with the Eibush, it's all backwards. Chanenu means Hashem should have Rachmanis on us, should have mercy on us. Hashem should give us Chaniyah, should give us a permanent place where we could rest, a part of the world which would, so to speak, make our own. We should have a place which is safe and secure and permanent. And Bapashtas, this means that it's Yisrael. That Hashem should give us Shevach, praise, like it says, He'amarta ne'amircha. And of course, the last interpretation is the idea of Matnas Chinam, that Hashem gives us Chen. Now, it says in the Mifarshim on the Midrash that there are 3 times Chen in this Perek. And he connects it to a Gemara in Seita, Daf Mem Zayin, which I looked up. That's why I'm giving you the page number. That Gimel Chines Heim. There are 3 concepts of Chen. Chen Mokam al Yeshveha, Chen Ish al Bailach, Chen Mekach al Mekche, al Lekche. So the 3 Chens in this Kapital are connected to this Maimon Chazal. So let's first talk about the word Chen. What does Chen mean? What does Chen mean? What does Chen mean? What does it mean to have Chen? What does it mean to have Chen? So you have the Maimon of the Rebbe Rashab from Tafreshayin Ches, Va'atam, no Masasi Chen, where the Rebbe Rashab is analyzing the word Chen. And he says by the word Chen you have contradictions. On the one hand you say Sheker HaChen, Vevel HaYofi, and Mishlei, and Eishes Chayil. On the other hand you say no Masasi Chen, so is Chen a good thing or a bad thing? So the translation of the word Chen means grace. or charm or appeal. Chen means a person who has an ability to draw other people to him or her in a way that you can't explain. Chen is an ephemeral character. Some people have chen, you're just likable people. And other people don't have chen, they're just not likable people. So chen is a grace or a charm or an appeal, a magnetism that you really can't pin down. So the Rebbe Rashab, this Maimer discusses chen, and he says that if a person is hollow, a person has no substance, a person is empty inside, they're phony, they're fake, but they have chen, so then sheker hachen, the chen enhances the lie. The ability, the natural grace that they have enhances the bluff of their life. But if a person is substantive, a person is full of goodness and avodas Hashem, the chen only enhances the gifts that they already possess. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, v'hata no matzasi chen. So the Chazal say, Gimel Chinesein, a person lives someplace. I live in Crown Heights. I love Crown Heights. I wouldn't want to live anyplace else. It's the Rebbe's Dalet Amos. But you know what people say about this neighborhood, right? A great place to visit. I can't imagine living anyplace else in the world. Now, if you're on Shlichus, wherever you live is Crown Heights. But you have to remember that it's Crown Heights. If you are on Shlichus someplace else in Crown Heights, but you're happy that it's not Crown Heights, then it's not Crown Heights. Chein Mokam al Yeshveha means that the place where you grew up and the place where you live, even if it's not the nicest place in the world, for you it's the nicest place in the world. Because Chein Mokam al Yeshveha, where you live, has an appeal to you in a way that when somebody else comes into that neighborhood and they say, you walk in these streets at night, you're not afraid. Of course, it's the safest place in the world. It's called Chein Mokam al Yeshveha. And then, of course, Chein Ishal Baila, that every man is blind to his wife's faults and to her iniquities and to her lack of perfection. And I would imagine that when the Gemara says Chein Ishal Baila, it's Chein Baila Lishtei. It goes both ways, that a couple that's truly married to each other, in the true definition of what marriage is, which is a physical thing, it's a psychological thing, it's a spiritual thing, and it's a divine thing. That the Torah says, the most natural relationship in the world is placated for an unnatural relationship, for a non-biological relationship in so many ways, and yet the relationship between a man and his wife, which are a created relationship rather than a natural relationship, exceeds the natural relationship. Like you have in Maimonides Chasidus, the Perek Nun and Tanya, the Tagbes, Aval HaChesed, explained the Likutei Torah, brought Nayim Beis. The Moshiach for this is the love for a husband and a wife, that even though it's a created relationship, not a natural relationship, it can be stronger than any natural relationship. It can be stronger than a Yechida relationship, which is a Neshama bond. And that's a Chein Ishal Baila. That the husband and a wife who are married the way a Yid is supposed to be married, is that everything about her and everything about him appeals to you. Even the things that somebody that are actually not kasreinis, to you they're chein. That's how it's supposed to be. And the third is chein mekach al mikche. When you buy something and you pay for it, and you made a bad purchase, you like it. You find a way of seeing how it's good for you. I have instances in my life where I bought things, and they were stupid purchases. They were bad purchases. I spent too much money. I wasn't getting what I thought I was getting. I gave up too much. But you tell yourself it was a good purchase. When you buy something and you pay for something, it has a value to you that has a chein property, meaning to say it doesn't make sense, but you like it because you bought it. So the Mifarshim and the Medrash Tilim bring this point, that the reason it says 3 times, Achi Chanenu, Chanenu, the Shem Chanenu, that there's 3 Chanines, so he brings this Maimeh Chazal, Shlosh Chinesim, which means that in Galus, Einei Elecha Nasases Einai, Einei Avadim Yad the name, Keinei Neinu El Shem Elikenu. As I explained at length before, what Einayim in this case means, it's Achi Chanenu, that the situation that the Eibishter gives us is an expression of Hashem's favoritism to us using 3 chines. That Hashem's relationship with the Jewish people and that Hashem's liking of the Jewish people has 3 aspects of chen. And the three aspects of chen is because we're his place, because we're his spouse, and we're his acquisition. We're the mokim of the Eibishter. Every single yid in his life, especially lives in Eretzenu, Eretz HaKedesh, Eretz Asher Tomed Ein Yad Hashem Elekecha Ba Mereishis Hashana V'ad Achris Shana, is the Eibishter's place, and we're the Eibishter's wife. That's obvious. And we're the Eibishter's kinyan. The Eibishter acquired us, like it says in the end of Perek Yovis, that Yisrael kinyan echad. And these are three different relationships. The relationship we have with Hashem, because we're his seat, we're his merkava. You know, when the Rebbe made the 12 psukim, when Mari Chazal, the Rebbe explained why he made each one of them. And one of them, of course, is Tanya Perek Mem Aleph. Hine Ad Hashem Nitzav Alov. Mistake. This year, Shnas HaIbur, in the Ibur Yor, the Tanya of Yer Alf Nissen is Hine Avay Nitzav Alov. And remember, when the Friedrich Rebbe made a shir, it was in Ibur Yor. Maybe they made Yem Yem. So the shir of Yer Alf Nissen and Chitas was Hine Ad Hashem Nitzav Alov, that every year is Merkabah for the Eibishter. It's very interesting. So it says three. And the Rebbe doesn't explain Hine Ad Hashem Nitzav Alov so much because of the Musar, so much because of the idea that Rebbe and Kloyes Valev, the Eibishter is examining us and the Eibishter is testing us. But because Hine Avay Nitzav Alov means that every year there's a Merkava for the Shechina, every year is the Eibishter's place in this world. And in addition, we're the Eibishter's wife, we're married to the Eibishter. As they say by the Chuppahs, to the exclusion of all others. We're the Eibishter's wife and the Eibishter is our husband, and there's no tzaddis, nobody else. That's it, just us. And there's a chen, Adam, Mokam al Yeshveh, chen Isha al Baila, and chen, Mekach al Mekchoi, that the Eibishter has a chen, has an aspect of grace, of seeing us with a graciousness, seeing us with a charm, Klayach, on all three of these levels, in as much as we're his seat, as we're his Merkava, in as much as we're his spouse, which is a much deeper idea of Yichud, and as much as we're his Mekach, we're his acquisition. And the way it's explained in Chassidus, that when you acquire something, you don't change it, you simply move it from one place to the next. But what it is, as it is good. So it says three times chen, because we're asking the Eibishter to give us a chanina, rachamim, and chaniyo, and chavivus, and matnas chinam, because of the chen that the Eibishter finds in us, or from us, or through us, towards him. Number one, we're his place. Number two, we're his spouse. And number three, we're his acquisition. And then, of course, we finish the Kapital with the shame that we're experiencing, the indignities, which are the reason we're crying out to the Eibishter using this means of Elecha Nasasias Eini Ayeshi Bashamayim. And we make three references to shame. Rav Savanu Vuz. We have been abundantly sated by shame, by indignities. Rabba Savalon Avshenu. Our souls have suffered a lot of shame. Halag, the mockery of Sha'ananim. And Sha'ananim has different interpretations. Either it means people who are themselves complacent, they're not the overly excited people, and yet somehow they find it within themselves to make fun of us. Or that people claim that we are Sha'ananim, like it says in Chazal, and Yeshna Mechad, you never work, they're always on vacation, this is always another Yom Tiv. Habuz legeyenim, and Habuz means again the shame that we suffer from Bailei Gaiva. And one of the insights which is brought, legeyenim, that yenim goes on Yerushalayim. Yenim means a dove. Legeyenim is written as one word. It's read as two words, legeyenim, but it's really legeyenim with one yud, legeyenim. The shame that we suffer from Bailei Gaiva, from people who are like Amalek. They're proud of themselves for no particular reason, but they know that they can mock the Jewish people. Or more specific, yenim, the mockery that they make from Yerushalayim. And Yerushalayim means the idea of Yiras Shamayim, the Jewish people's service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, I haven't found an interpretation of these three shames. But you have to assume that just like there's Gimel Chine shame, so there's obviously three concepts of lag, of the Jewish people being scoffed and mocked, and I'm not sure what they are. I didn't find the Chazal to support it. But one thing we know for sure is that we're taught Al yevish mipnei hamaligim. There are all kinds of scoffers, there are all kinds of mockers. And we're not allowed to be nispol from those who malik, who laugh at us. And from this Perek, there's different kinds of maligim. There's maligim who laugh at us because we're behaving in a way which is unbecoming of us. There are maligim who laugh at us because they say that we're behaving in a way which exaggerates our own self-worth, that maybe we're getting a little bit carried away with ourselves. And there's maligim who laugh at us for no particular reason. There's maligim who laugh at us because we're not worthwhile, because we're making ourselves too valuable, and for no particular reason. And in all three cases, we say al yevish b'nei hamaligim. And in this Perek, we're asking the Eibishter for grace. We're asking the Eibishter for chanina to help us manage and master and transcend and get past the maligim, those who mock us. So this is an overview of the Kapital, and to be sure, I included in this interpretation quite a bit of what the Mifarshim have to say. I plan to give several more classes on this Perek. I'm not sure exactly how it's going to play out, because all told, I have sort of three different overviews of this Kapital, which I will talk about in Mitzvah Hashem at the beginning of the next class.